malt vinegar.
Oh, really?
Malt vinegar,
That'd be really
and
good.
they're so good. They're phenomenal, and it's like not much seasoning to it. It's pretty much just malt vinegar and pearl onions.
Yeah.
Straightforward, as English would be.
Yeah,
Let's keep it as simple as possible.
That's awesome.
Know. I got this opportunity for a house over off of Illinois and Winding Way, right on Sailor Bar entrance, and we got to get that land, and I started farming for strictly pickles. So I just did cucumbers strictly for pickling. I didn't want to farm anything else because I knew, well, I don't have to go to the store and buy them. If I can just grow them myself, nobody in my family ever did that, we'll do that, and we'll go from there. So that was kind of like the start for me in getting into pickling hard of farming, went from there, and then went to Instagram, selling to Facebook people, and it just kind of flew off from there. We already knew our pickles were a big hit, but getting here in Fair Oaks in a small community and such big support, it was a big thing for us to have the local support and the local community actually buying and loving our stuff. So that's a small intro of why I do what I do, and we'll go from there. So I'm a big history buff, so I don't know if you guys are going to like this information or not, but I like to get in the history of actually pickling and where it comes from and what it is. It's small, but it's kind of crazy that pickling with vinegar likely originated around Mesopotamia around 2400 BC. So if anybody could kind of put that into perspective, how long ago that is, yeah. And the first thing was cucumbers. So yes, pickles were the first thing ever found. Physical evidence, that was the first pickle thing. So, and they were actually found in the Tigris Valley. So pickling vegetables and vinegar continued to develop in the Middle East regions before spreading to Sicily and Spain, which ended up being pretty much everything that came over to us during the later times of migration. So typical pickling is a process of preserving food and anaerobic fermentation in brine or vinegar. There are 3 methods of vinegar brine pickling. Quick pickles. So we could start here. Quick pickles. This is a great thing with quick pickles. I feel like if anybody in this room has not touched anything of pickling or pickling jars or trying to pickle, this is probably the best way to start. You're going to start with a simple brine. Usually it's a 1-to-1 ratio of vinegar to water, and then you're usually dealing with 2 to 3 tablespoons of salt. Depends on what you want, but you're going to get a ratio of brine boiling and then have your vegetables packed into a clean, sterilized jar, pour the brine in there, seal the jars, and then they can be put in the fridge once they're cooled down to room temperature for at least 2 to 3 days, and they're ready to eat. But the only downfall on that is that they have a short lifespan. So usually you kind of eat within that week, week and a half. They could hold a little longer depending on your salt ratio to vinegar brine. Which is great for those is like cucumbers, radishes. I love pickled zucchini, which is a great thing because everybody grows zucchini and squash. If you pick them small, they're really, really good. If you cut them into thick chunks, they can be pickled really well. And then you start going into salt brining. So salt brine, you can go with, we do a lot of kimchi and stuff like that. So radishes, something with a heavy moisture content, eggplant. What else here? Zucchini. They could you technically are trying to draw the moisture out of the vegetable. So you would toss them into a salt brine, just salt vegetable, let them pull the water out, and then drain, rinse, and then set into their brine and go. So that's a second variety of pickling with salt brines. The third is sweet vinegar pickles. So your bread and butter pickles, your relishes. Usually there's always going to add sugar or some type of sweet vinegar to them, which I have a lineup of different vinegars here. We usually are around the 5% vinegar range. I like these guys. The only time I use red wine vinegar is usually around with my red onions, if I'm doing red onions, or with the apple cider vinegar. You could use those with your bread and butter pickles or your sweet pickles. Some people even like dill pickles with a little bit of apple cider vinegar. I prefer the white vinegar. Rice wine vinegar is really good for if you like kimchi style stuff. You can get fresh radishes, thinly slice them, put them in a fresh jar of vinegar, just straight rice vinegar, and throw them in your fridge, and they're ready to eat within 24 hours. But yet again, they only last within that week range, safe-wise. You know, as long as they're stayed refrigerated.
Do you need salt with the rice wine vinegar too?
Yes, yeah. So usually, like I said, so going back on the salt brine, you would salt your radishes before. So you don't have to worry about the salt ratio. You could you can cut and slice them and then add a lot of salt to them, keep them in a bowl for maybe 2 to 3 hours, and you're gonna come back to about 2 to 3 inches of water from it leaching out the water. You drain and then you rinse with clean water. I'm a stickler. I use distilled water to rinse just because I don't trust our city water. So I use distilled, especially if it's fermented or if it's not, even if it's pickled. But yeah, you definitely want to do that. And then that kind of pre-salts that vegetable beforehand, if that makes sense. Yeah. Another kind of historical thing I probably should have said back on the side, but back in 1795, Napoleon offered a reward for whoever would develop a safe, reliable food preservation method for his army. 15 years later, there was a method considered the first pressure canning or heat canning introduced that involved heat processing food in glass jars. The rest is history. That was, I forget his last name, Apetto, but he was a French man. He is considered the first person to create glass jar pickling. Cleopatra claimed that the pickles were part of the secret of her beauty, and Caesar gave the pickles to his soldiers for strength, which I thought was pretty cool. So let's talk about hot brines. So kind of going the same deal as quick pickles. I want to say a lot of pros on hot brines are that you get a lot of flavor penetration, considering that you're pouring a liquid hot brine onto your vegetables. So you're actually taking the boiling brine and pouring it into your fresh vegetables, let alone a brine that's been boiled and then cooled, which helps a lot in the long run. Longer shelf life, because you're usually going to do a water canning bath with these guys. If you don't, you could easily just tip them over on their upsides, on their tops after taking them out of their hot brine and let them sit like that overnight, and they could be totally fine as long as you get that solid seal. But usually I would keep them in the fridge after that for a water bath. Definitely does not need to be refrigerated after until opened. Slightly soft, not as crunchy until, so if you add calcium chloride, that's a really big one. It's a natural, you could add to it for crunchiness, or we use grape leaves. So grape leaves are really good, and oak leaves. So if you could find, usually almost 95% of oak leaves are 100% edible, and they add crispness to vegetables. So you could either get local oak leaves or grape leaves, which are pretty abundant around here in Sacramento, you could use for crisp.
Any particular kind of oak leaves?
I've never, I avoid the ones with the spikes, so, yeah, but I've used a couple around here and I've never had issues. I mean, I would assume you could probably go out here and get a couple of those, and yeah, my aunt, she has a Russian family, and they used a lot of oak leaves, and horseradish too is another good one that will help with better.
Horseradish leaves.
So let's talk about cold brine refrigerator pickles, which we kind of already got into a little bit. They preserve the texture and the crunch of the vegetable. So if you're looking for that more fresh, not as soft. People always complain about my pickles are soft. They're not crunchy. What's happening? You know, if you're looking for that more fresh, almost essence of the vegetable with the brine, I prefer cold brines where you're actually going to boil the brine first and then let it cool down to a room temperature, pour it over your vegetables, seal, and put it in the refrigerator. Same thing, they're going to have a short shelf life, but they do have that essence of the actual vegetable. Not as much flavor penetration as your hot brine, but I feel like out of this, there's a couple in here that I have a handful up here that are actually a mix of cold brine, hot brine, and pressure can. So you're gonna get an option of what you like, difference on texture-wise, which will help. No canning method needed, which is a huge thing for intro picklers. You're not going to need a pressure canner. You're not going to be overwhelmed. Even people, I know family members who never water bath their pickles when we do ours because they got so scared of them exploding. Because if you do it too hot or sometimes, or you pack them not correctly, too much moisture in the jar, they could crack and explode, and then you're losing jars. And it's just some people eventually avoided it. So this is a nice thing about that. You don't have to worry about that extra step. It's something pretty fail-safe that anybody could do with the simple techniques of having the right brine ratios. Usually ready to eat within 48 hours. I've had Pickles like this right here that I've cut into spears, or even little medallions like that I could pop open the next day and taste just as good as a 2-week-old, pickled cucumber. So it definitely helps for that. Let's see here. Let's go to the next stage here. So I'll be pretty short on the pressure canning because pressure canning can be pretty intimidating sometimes. I'm still slightly new into the pressure canning. So a couple years, about 4 or 5 years, I say a couple, but it's still, it's a process. But yeah, pressure canning can be slightly intimidating, especially for beginners. It's well worth it. Don't limit yourself to water bath canning jars and pickles. Once you learn how to pressure can it properly, you'll be able to safely can low acidic foods like vegetable soups, meats, and all sorts of other fun stuff. I think that's the biggest thing that's different between canning and pickling. You can pickle vegetables and fruits and stuff like that. Usually not much fruit, but usually with canning, you're always going to have meats and soups and stuff like that are way low on the acidic side, which right here, my olives, very low in the acidic. They fall in that pressure canning. Green beans can be done both ways. Some argue it that they have to be pressure canned. I've made it my whole life with them being water bath. Never. I'm still standing here 33 years, so I guess it's still safe. But some argue that it has to be pressure canned because they are low acidic food. Onions, same thing. Done it my whole life. Never had an issue as long as you water bath long enough. But yeah, so that is the biggest thing on that. So let's see here. To get back to what I was going to start at is that this is something that I'm very proud of, something that I've been doing for a long time, and I'm just here to share the information and knowledge that I've learned and that I've put the stress and time into to show to people that it's not as hard as it's kind of sought out to be. And family members have been doing it. I guarantee somebody has a grandpa or grandma or an uncle or an aunt that used to pickle stuff. So I'm open to questions. I know my speech wasn't too long. Like I said, I'm not the best on talking to people, but I'm here to take anything open, and we have a lot of stuff to taste. So all these are open to flavors and to eat up. So yeah, thanks guys, appreciate it.
I have a question on your olives.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you can the fresh olives?
No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that could be a whole class itself on olives. But yeah, to get a quick explanation, they have a bitter quality to them. I can't pronounce it. It's like olerufian. Yeah, it's got a natural bitter quality, which is like the most bitter stuff you've ever eaten. They actually go through almost a fermentation process. If they're not liqueured, they actually go through a fermentation process, which is salt. And these took 11 and a half months to cure. Yeah, so those were picked last year? Yeah. So those were just pulled out about 3 days ago out of their main fermentation jar. And you have to change the brine about every 3 to 5 months. And it's a process. That one's probably taken me the most of olives that I've failed more on olives than I have on anything else pickling because it's such a low acidic fruit. And it's a part of the cherry family. It's a part of all those, it's actually one of the more historical fruits out of all these here standing, other than the pickles, the cucumbers. Yeah, so it's a process, but UC Davis has a great page that you can look up that will give you everything possible to cure olives. If you look up UC Davis olive curing, they have, it's like 12 pages of every style, how to do it safely. So if you're ever interested, we're surrounded by olive trees around here. So yeah.
I did it a couple years ago and they turned out fine. This year I tried a different method and they
Not yet. It's very hit and miss.
Can you talk a little bit more about the challenge for a low acidic fruit or vegetable to pickle, and what makes that a health challenge, or what makes that?
I think the biggest challenge is more or less is just the process, because you're going to have to pressure can it, which people get scared of. I think I had that in mind. I didn't even say it, but a lot of people, is my kitchen going to blow up? Am I going to do this? There's so many horror stories I've heard. For at least I was always scared straight from a lot of family members. Like I had bad issues with pressure canners because they weren't doing it right. But in the long run, pressure canning is going to give you the most shelf-stable, long-standing stuff that you could have, especially if it comes down to living homestead, you're going to probably want to definitely learn about pressure canning, because you could do anything from the meats, like if you want to, you could put meat, chicken, beef, soup, salsas, a lot of stuff that you're not used to seeing in the store can. Well, you're used to seeing them in a can, but a mason jar, so it's a process, which I'm still, like I said, I'm still learning I'm still in that learning stage of pressure canning. It's the knowledge is all there. That's the great thing about the internet nowadays. You can Google something with pressure canning, but I think people get scared because of that. It has such a slightly not bad rep, but I've heard so much of scarce, I don't want it to blow up on me, which now pressure canning, they have so many, the new ones are fail proof.
Has anything blown up on you?
No. And I'm using one from like 77, so yeah. Mine's old, yeah.
Is there a health risk then to pickling something in a brine and not canning it?
Botulism is one of the top ones, but also botulism has to be present in the soil. It actually has to be there present to be a part of it. It doesn't just occur. So root vegetables, that's like onions, radishes, something that's in contact with the actual soil. Those are usually garlic, stuff like that. They hold the more risks to botulism. And usually those are the more low acidic for, not all of them, but some, and most are on that low acidic side. So, but botulism, there's more, I can't pronounce them, but yeah, there's definitely more bacteria and fungi that you would not want. But the temperature of boiling in the water bath is about 212 degrees. Water boils around 212. The more you go up, I think it's every 500 feet elevation, you have to adjust by one temperature, or like a degree, from what I remember, if I'm not mistaken. But it's around there. So if you go up, say, Tahoe, you're going to want to, pressure canning, you want to adjust your ratios in time because stuff is going to be different. But yeah, definitely when it comes to that, it's just the health thing of keeping the botulism is the biggest thing. That's what olives, like, I think there's been horror stories of people dying pretty quick because they're not cured properly, or their botulism is a pretty deadly one, when it's not done correctly. So that's why we take our stuff very seriously. And we have pH strips. If I ever feel like something is even on the questionable side, I'll test it before I ever even think about eating it myself, let alone giving it out to the public. So, yeah.
And how long does something last once it's jarred like that?
So pressure can, it depends. I mean, in reality, what you're storing is. Are you in a cellar? Are you in a refrigerator? You want to keep in that range of like 65, you don't want to go over the 70s. You want to stay in that kind of cool, damp, not damp, but cool, dark range. A cupboard, as long as your AC used throughout the year. Those pressure canning, you can last anywhere a year, 2 years. I've heard 5, 7. It just depends on where you're at. I've eaten stuff that's 4 years old of ours that weren't even pressure canned just because I'm risky, and we never had issue. We had them underneath the house, and they kind of stayed where they're at. It really depends on your location and your storing. But for pressure canning, definitely about within year, 2 years. Water bath, you can look anywhere from 4 to 6 months, if not a year. If it's in a refrigerator and water bath, you can go year, 2 years. I've had our pickles go no problem, not having it. You're going to lose texture. You're going to lose, they're not going to stay crunchy. If you're going to eat a pickle that's been sitting in your fridge for a year and a half, it's going to be soggy. I'm just going to be straightforward. It's not going to be the greatest. The flavor is going to be good, but with texture, you're probably going to definitely lose some texture. Olives, a lot of people don't read their jars. They want to be consumed within 7 days of opening. So, yeah, most all olives, unless they're like super salted, like the ones I've gotten you before, the purple salted. Yeah, they usually want to be consumed within 7 days. Yeah, a lot of people don't understand salami, dried salami. Look at the back of there. The dried salami, that's eat within 7 days. I wonder why I had so many stomach aches growing up as a kid. My mom would get the quadruple value pack and I'd be eating that for 2 months. But yeah, there's certain things you just got to look on the back. Yeah, 7 days. There's a couple other ones I've seen that, but eat within 7 days of opening. But other than that, usually as long as they're kept refrigerated or in that cool state, especially after opening, keep your mind on after you open it. When I open a jar, I put on the lid, opened. And I put the date. You never know. People start eating stuff, then I know, okay. I know it was made within this time, but I know I opened it here because I know when it's unopened, it's good. But once I open it, you're introducing it to outside bacteria. Even just open it in your kitchen. You know, you see the stuff floating around when you're vacuuming and drying. You know, that's going in your jar. So it's something to think about when it comes to that. So I would say it just depends on the process that you're pickling it in. Water bath, refrigerator pickles. Refrigerator pickles, eat them within the week. They're not going to last. Usually the half time, if I'm doing refrigerator stuff, they're not making it within 3 to 4 days. Because that jar is going to get eaten probably the next day or the day before that. The other ones, when you're going in, then you start getting into the water bath and stuff like that, you're going for more shelf life, you know, but then you start pressure canning, you're going for longevity. You're thinking of, you know, corn, peas, you know, I'm thinking of stuff that I could stack away in a cupboard, tomato sauces and you know, stuff that it's like, I got 80 jars of that. I got 40 jars of that. Even though nobody's going to, you know, even if you don't get to those numbers, it's still nice to know those are your kind of long-term, mid-term, I'm eating tomorrow. So.
How do you tell if they're, when you said they have, what would be questionable to you? Like,
Botulism?
yeah, you can't.
So if I would pick a vegetable, usually olives, it's a telltale sign. It's not going to smell like olives. Olives have a very distinct. They have a very bad. It's a unique smell. It's hard to explain. Pickles, usually some type of mold on the top, not on the bottom. So if you have a surface mold and not a bottom mold, which is a lacto, so you saw the ones that I brought last time, the fermented pickles, that had that lacto on the bottom, that kind of cloudy, good, that's good bacteria. Usually the stuff floating on the top, it's all gray and black, it's not good bacteria, you know? So that's a good sign, telltale sign. But usually astringent smells, something that is off. If you know you have garlic, dill, and coriander, and it smells nothing of that, usually that's a telltale sign that. But also the cheapest thing you could buy a pH tester, like a little, it's like a thermometer almost, or you can get the strips, and it's great. They have a color coded from, usually mine go from like 1 to 14, and you know, you dip it in there, put it up to the scale, wait 15 seconds. Is it good? Okay, we're good. We go off from it. I can't tell you how many jars of stuff I've thrown away way back in the past before those that were probably totally fine, you know, just because I was so skeptical of, is it okay to eat? Is it totally fine? So the pH strips are super cheap. You can get them on Amazon in bulk. They save you, they'll last you your lifetime of pickling because you only use a little piece of it. So
That's assuming you use some kind of acidic thing to can them. If you're not, like peas or something, and you're not putting vinegar, then the pH, I don't know.
Are you talking about the green beans on these guys?
Yeah, I don't know if those are pickled, but my aunt used to can black-eyed peas.
Oh, just like a salt brine, just like a typical, so that'd be the pressure canning. Yeah, so you'd be strictly the salt brine, pressure can.
You know when you open it.
You could test it when you open it. Yeah.
So you still have
But
pH.
pressure canning, the 99% of the time, almost 100% of the time, anything pressure canned is never going to have if it's pressure canned, anything over 212 is going to be snuffed out of actual living. Yeah, that's why you pressure can those certain styles of, so you're killing off any of those diseases and stuff like that, bacterias.
The main difference between this and say like making sauerkraut with a lacto fermentation is just lack of any vinegar? Or?
Night and day difference, yeah. Yeah, you're actually feeding off of the natural bacteria. Yes, in the air at the same time, because everywhere is going to ferment differently. Because you're usually opening out there, you're working it into a bowl, and you're just packing straight into a clean vessel, and then having it kimchi, radish. We do a lot of cabbage kimchi and radish kimchi. Those sit which I brought a couple different fermentation jars. So I have crocks here, and I have this cool jar that Mason that they can make here. They have a little breather here. So usually you see the little breathers with the water on the top. They can be, they work great, but this is awesome. You don't have to worry about the water. It lets air out, doesn't let air in. You got the spring to keep your vegetables under your liquid, which also we have, I think I might have put it away somewhere, but there's a weight too. They have weights, the same thing that will kind of hold because you always want them submerged. But the fermentation, it's a night and day. That's why I would love to get into the fermentation, but I could talk another probably whole speech on fermentation, which...
Because the ambient temperature is a huge difference.
Oh, huge. And then, how hot your living room is, how or your kitchen, how fast they could ferment. Usually my kimchi, within 2 to 3 days, I'm ready to get it back in the fridge, which will continue to ferment, but usually still it does its most intense fermentation within those 2 to 3 days on your countertop. So
Yeah, I definitely had a sauerkraut go 1 day too long. And
yeah,
like,
yeah,
it's not
you'll know.
offensive,
Yeah.
but it's like, it's a little off.
yeah, you'll know.
For the dog at the-
I know. I almost brought. I had kimchi and sauerkraut to bring, but I didn't want to get in too deep into the fermentation.
Yeah, I had a friend back in Texas, and she wouldn't eat sauerkraut until it was 3 months in the fridge. That was when she started getting into her sauerkraut.
Yeah, our kimchi's, I usually pop them open about 4 or 5 months. Yeah, let them sit, get real sour.
I have a question on the fermentation side.
Yeah.
So like, the jars that you buy at the grocery store,
Mm-hmm.
you open them, you take some out. How easy is it to compromise those jars once they're fermented? Like say you've been eating out of it for a week or whatever with a spoon or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and you put it back. How long do those last after they're open? Even before?
So like bubbies and stuff like that, the fermentation jars, they're usually on that same range. I probably wouldn't eat them after like a week or 2 weeks. But it's still that brine, as long as it's kept at a cold consistency and you're not keeping it out open. I like to open my lid, take something out and close it as fast as possible. And big people, some people, you see people grab pickles, or the hands, as much as it will ruin a jar of anything pickled. Doesn't matter how high the vinegar is, the salt, it will eventually tamper with it because it's such a sensitive product, with vegetables and stuff like that. But I would say within a week, 2 weeks. I mean, I have a jar of bubbies that I've had probably like a week and a half, and it's still amazing, but I could definitely tell it's probably getting close to like it's ready to go.
You have to keep you have to keep like the sauerkraut stuff underneath the brine?
I push it down here and there, but sauerkraut is so salted, I don't ever worry about it. I eat probably like 4 or 5 spoonfuls every morning, so that's like my breakfast is sauerkraut. So yeah, I get a couple German brands that I've been solemnly set to for about 20 years, and I'll stick with those. So yeah, you don't usually, as long as they're not like fully dry, as long as they're refrigerated. I mean, the ingredients are salt and cabbage, so that's all you got there, Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah.
I know I've had stuff, I've tried to reuse like the brine from the
like sauerkraut, yeah.
Like, just to see if I get the flavor, and after a couple of days it starts almost getting carbonated.
Yeah, that's a natural fermentation. That's probably not good. Yeah.
It goes to the chicken.
I had to tell people that with our pickle company, and it was like, I had people always message me or call me, hey, I loved your brine so much, or after the pickles, I just made like 5 or 6 more. I'm like, please don't do that. Like, I love the determination and everything, but please don't do that. Like, I'll give you $5 off your next jar. Just don't get sick, man. I don't want, that's the last thing I need, Local person dying from pickles in Fair Oaks, There goes my business.
Never-ending soup.
Yeah, that's why they think they're like, I'm on my 7th one. I've just been buying cucumbers and onions, and they show vegetables stacked in them. Oh no, that's not how it works, man. I'm sorry. If it was that easy, like everybody would be doing it, but at this point we can't do that. So, well, I had a little question. Anybody know the country that consumes the most pickles? Come on, my wife guessed it on the dot. And I was like, you looked at my card. She's like, no, I didn't. Come on. Nope. Come on.
Germany.
Okay.
Second is U.S. 3 pounds per person a year, which I'm probably in the 8 pound or 10 pounds, so I don't. Any more questions? Anybody? Or everybody's just ready to eat some stuff?
Get the taste of them.
Yeah. So it's pretty much going to be open. I'm going to put a fork in every jar. Every jar will have this clean fork. These will be you can come up and help yourself. We have pickled red onions, which are grown from our property, which is very fun and tasty. These are actually in strictly red wine vinegar and seasonings. You got peppercorn, coriander, fennel seed, bay leaf. These are regular, just garlic dill pickles. And you'll have spicy pickled quail eggs, Cajun spicy pickled quail eggs. These are going to be pickled radishes. And then these are also another dill style, but pickled in little medallions. garlic, crushed red pepper, olives cured from our property. They're not spicy, just for looks. Slightly spicy pickled green beans. And then we'll have, I call them mustard zucchini. They got, because I think the mustard seed really pushed through on these guys. So those are pickled zucchini. Pickled pearl onions, which are a great cocktail or just eating by themselves. And then you have a pickled carrot. So. And then homemade sourdough, everything bagel, crackers made about an hour before. So if you want to set off the pickled to crunchy, there you go, add to that. So enjoy, everybody. Thank you for coming out. I appreciate everybody. Thank you. And the olives have bits, so just before everybody crunches into them.
Oh, they only need individual portions.
Yeah, so thank you.